In the modern world, where science and technology have reached unprecedented heights, where everyone carries a device in their pocket that can instantly access virtually any piece of information, one field remains surprisingly resilient and prosperous: the psychic industry. Even today, you'll find plenty of people claiming to possess abilities that go far beyond the known laws of nature. You'd think the Age of Enlightenment would have left such beliefs in the dust, but reality tells a different story. These people are thriving, drawing audiences of thousands on television, across social media, and through paid one-on-one consultations, which raises an obvious question. Why does this still work in the 21st century? Why are we so gullible that we keep believing in the supernatural? Interest in mysticism surges most during periods of social crisis and instability. In times of economic downturn, pandemic, or political upheaval, people feel an intense need to control their lives. When the familiar world collapses and all you see ahead is a fog of anxiety and uncertainty, you turn to the irrational. The promise of knowing the future, understanding the hidden causes of events, or being shielded from disaster becomes incredibly seductive. It's a deep psychological need for certainty, one that, in moments of crisis, completely overrides rational thought. On the flip side, the pull toward the mystical also comes from plain curiosity and a thirst for a good thrill. Now let's break down who these psychics really are and what abilities they claim to have. The range of claims is staggeringly wide. Some say they can see the future, predicting your fate, major events, or dates of life-altering changes. Others claim they can read minds, talk to the dead, or see auras. Still others insist they can diagnose illness from a photograph or at a distance, manipulate energy fields, and remove curses. The list keeps growing, shifting with cultural trends and market demand. Friends, if you honestly believe psychics are the real deal, ask yourselves this: why are crimes still solved by police departments rather than by psychics? If they truly existed, what would be the point of maintaining an entire police force when a single psychic could just gaze into their magic crystal ball and pinpoint a criminal's exact location? Why do we need specialized airport equipment and trained dogs that sniff out dangerous substances if we could just hire a psychic who'd read a villain's mind and know their plans in advance? And why would the military bother using drones for reconnaissance if there were psychics who could tell them exactly where the enemy is hiding? Now, I'm no psychic, but I'm already starting to sense that you, my viewer, are developing a small crack in your usual worldview. Remember this: everyone who calls themselves a psychic is either a con artist or a lunatic who genuinely believes they have some kind of supernatural powers. It's worth tracing the historical roots of this phenomenon. Belief in people with supernatural abilities is as old as humanity itself. In ancient tribes, the shaman or witch doctor held a central place in society. He was the doctor, the fortune teller, and the intermediary between the living and the spirit world. Back then, this was accepted as normal because there were no alternative explanations for natural phenomena. Illness, drought, a successful hunt. Everything was chalked up to invisible forces, and the shaman was the one who could supposedly negotiate with those forces. As civilization evolved, the forms changed, but the essence remained. Shamans gave way to modern psychics, whose image was heavily shaped by the mass media of the 20th century. Now let's turn to the scientific perspective on this. Science as a system of knowledge is built on the principle of reproducibility. If someone claims to have an ability, say, seeing through closed eyes or reading minds at a distance, that claim must be testable. There has to be an experiment that can be carried out under controlled conditions, ruling out cheating and chance, and that experiment must produce statistically significant results. But here's the thing: over more than a century of so-called parapsychology research, not a single, convincing, reproducible piece of evidence for psychic abilities has ever been produced. Let me say that again: not a single one. A handful of experiments have occasionally shown results slightly above random chance, but when researchers tried to replicate them under stricter controls, the effect vanished. That's a classic sign of either a methodological flaw, hidden fraud, or pure statistical noise. There's a fundamental difference between belief and verifiable fact. A person can sincerely believe they have a gift. They can have subjective experiences that they interpret as evidence of superpowers. But a subjective experience is not proof. If I sincerely believe I can fly, that doesn't mean I can jump out a window without consequences. Reality doesn't care what we believe. That's why the scientific method insists on objective testing, and those are precisely the tests that psychics, time and time again, fail spectacularly. The history of attempts to prove the existence of such abilities is highly instructive. Over the decades, hundreds of experiments have been conducted. Perhaps the most famous is the work of the James Randi Educational Foundation. James Randi, an illusionist and tireless debunker of frauds, established a foundation that, from 1996 to 2015, offered a large cash prize to anyone who could demonstrate paranormal abilities under controlled experimental conditions. The prize eventually reached $1 million. The terms were dead simple and completely transparent. The applicant and the foundation would first agree on a testing protocol that ruled out any possibility of cheating or random guessing. Then the test would be run. Over the entire existence of the prize, hundreds of people passed the initial screening. Not a single one passed the formal test. Many of them dropped out at the protocol stage, realizing that under fair conditions, their abilities, for some reason, would suddenly stop working. There's also a similar prize, though with a smaller payout, named after Harry Houdini, for demonstrating paranormal abilities under properly set experimental conditions. And yes, to this day, no one has ever claimed it. So, if psychic abilities don't exist, how do people calling themselves psychics actually operate? And why do their clients so often leave a session stunned by the accuracy of the information they received? The answer lies in a set of psychological techniques that have been refined over decades, and that any person can learn without a trace of mysticism. The main technique is called cold reading. It's a method of extracting information about a person without their awareness by analyzing their appearance, body language, age, clothing, accent, and other nonverbal cues. On top of that, the psychic adds generalized statements that are highly likely to apply to almost anyone, then rapidly adjusts based on the client's reactions. A psychic starts a session with vague, general phrases that psychologists call Barnum statements. For example, "I sense that you've experienced some kind of loss in the past." Which adult hasn't? Or, "You're currently in a period of transition. You're standing on the edge of something new." That applies to practically every person on Earth. Then the micro-reaction reading begins. If the client nods, leans forward, or their eyes widen, the psychic knows they've hit a nerve and starts doubling down on that thread. If the client's face stays blank, the psychic quickly pivots, often without the client even realizing there were several misses. A masterfully executed cold reading session creates the total illusion that a complete stranger knows deeply personal and detailed things about you. Here's another fascinating experiment. A psychologist gave students a personality test and then handed out what were supposedly individualized assessments. In reality, everyone got the exact same text, filled with general statements like, "You have a great deal of untapped potential," or "You're disciplined and restrained on the outside, but inside you tend toward doubt and anxiety." The students were asked to rate the accuracy of the description on a 5-point scale. The average score was extremely high, over 4 points. People tend to mistake broad, vague statements for precise personality descriptions, especially when they're delivered with an air of authority. And that's exactly what a psychic does. And honestly, the more brazenly and confidently someone delivers a lie, the more people believe it. Remember the global hysteria leading up to 2012, when huge numbers of people genuinely expected the end of the world? The media constantly pushed this narrative, and Hollywood even produced big-budget blockbusters about catastrophic, planet-wide disasters. Around that time, I came across a video online from the leader of a religious sect who declared himself a prophet and was flatly stating, with absolute confidence, that the world would end in 2012. But here's the really interesting part. After the year passed and the predicted catastrophe didn't happen, some of his followers started having doubts. Timidly at first, they began asking their spiritual leader about the slight inaccuracy of his predictions. The liar's reply came with the straightest, most unshakable face, as if he hadn't just humiliated himself, and trashed his own credibility with yet another load of nonsense, but rather, his followers were simply too stupid to properly understand his words. And honestly, how dare they doubt their leader? He told them that all his prophecies had indeed come true, and that a planet-wide catastrophe really did occur in 2012. They just didn't notice it, because higher powers, thanks to their collective spiritual efforts, had intervened and shifted us into another dimension. In other words, the catastrophe happened in the old dimension, but we missed it because we seamlessly moved to a new one. Pure genius-level nonsense. And you think people saw through the lie and left the sect? No, they stayed and bought every word of this garbage. Another sect leader, who also calls himself a prophet and a psychic, used a different playbook. He just started whipping people into a frenzy, claiming that something terrible is coming, a global transformation of consciousness, and only those who are spiritually prepared will survive, while the rest will supposedly perish. He's been ratcheting up that psychological tension for almost 20 years now. And whenever natural disasters or armed conflicts occur, which, purely statistically, happen from time to time, something you don't need any special powers to predict, this fraud records another video or posts another message saying, "See? I was right. All my words are coming true, and this is only the beginning." Some charlatans in the stock market operate the exact same way. They'll spend years claiming that a certain company's stock is about to explode, and over time, the stock may indeed rise significantly, which is completely natural, especially over a long enough timeline. But the scammer will be right there to take credit for their supposed genius, even digging up some old social media post as proof that they predicted the stock's rise. All the failed predictions, of course, will be conveniently memory holed, and they'll start offering you their expensive stock trading advisory services. In exactly the same way, a psychic, having cranked up your anxiety with talk of global catastrophe, will proceed to sell you supposedly magical amulets and assorted junk that, according to them, will cleanse your consciousness and keep you alive through the apocalypse. You really think winning your trust and admiration is that hard? Then let me show you just how insidiously people are fooled in the 21st century. Chances are you have no idea how it's done, so hit that like button and get ready to be amazed. Here's the deal. There are entire companies that recruit charismatic, articulate people with attractive looks into the roles of so-called psychics and enlightened masters. The idea is that each one of them gets a carefully crafted backstory, a distinctive persona, and a set of predictions about global events. They're then launched onto popular social media platforms and video hosting sites, where each of them broadcasts their pre-scripted, made-up predictions and presents themselves as someone with supernatural abilities. What ordinary people don't realize is that all of them are secretly working for the same company, in collusion. To keep the illusion alive, these so-called psychics will even publicly criticize each other from time to time. Now here's the really clever part. Collectively, this entire roster pumps out a huge volume of predictions. All of these predictions are cooked up by a staff of skilled analysts who deeply understand the social, economic, and political landscape. They generate a whole range of likely forecasts, and it's entirely possible that one of them will, to some degree of accuracy, actually play out in the near future. As a result, one of the company's psychics will make the prediction that hits the mark, while the rest will miss. But by then, that doesn't matter. They'll get their payouts and quietly delete their fake profiles into oblivion. But as for the one whose prediction accidentally lined up with reality, their popularity gets massively boosted, and their authority and recognition skyrocket. This person, with their unusual image and sharp psychological tricks, starts building a large, trusting audience and begins peddling the services and products of the hidden company behind them. The scale of this industry is staggering. It's a full-fledged business with billions in revenue. A single in-person session with a famous psychic can run you several $1,000s an hour, and that price includes nothing more than talking. Online consultations, which have exploded in popularity in recent years, allow the business to scale without any geographic limits. On top of that, there are paid courses for unlocking your abilities, where people spend their own money to learn to be psychics, essentially being taught the very same cold reading and manipulation techniques, but packaged as developing a gift. The sale of amulets, candles, charged water, personalized horoscopes, and all sorts of other paraphernalia multiplies the revenue further. It's an incredibly lucrative field because the cost of the product is basically zero, while the selling price is entirely unregulated and limited only by the client's willingness to pay and their level of suggestibility. Just take this in. The global market for mystical services is worth tens of billions of dollars a year. The media plays a massive role in propping up the popularity of psychics. TV shows featuring psychics, aired on major networks, create a powerful illusion that what's happening is real. Very few viewers stop to think that television is, first and foremost, a show, a product manufactured according to the rules of the genre. The programs use standard directing tricks, editing that cuts out the failed attempts, music that builds suspense, careful camera work, and dramatically scripted storylines with a mandatory emotional climax. If they showed the raw, unedited footage, where a psychic spends 2 hours cycling through guesses and barely ever gets anything right, the audience would see a completely different picture. There's been no shortage of exposés throughout the history of the psychic industry. Many well-known figures have been caught red-handed using hidden microphones, planting accomplices who gather information on clients in advance, outright peeking, or simply running internet searches right before a blind session. One classic scheme is when the client is asked to fill out a detailed questionnaire or submit an application on a website, and by the time of the appointment, the psychic already has all the information from the client's social media and other public sources in their hands. Another cognitive mechanism is the confirmation bias. A person who walks into a session is already motivated to believe. They remember the hits and forget or rationalize the misses. If a psychic makes 10 statements, 2 of which turn out to be accurate, 5 are vague and open to any interpretation, and 3 are flat out wrong, the client will leave that session remembering only the 2 hits. They'll tell their friends, "You won't believe it. She said I had a grandmother named Samantha, and that she's sending me her love." The fact that the psychic had cycled through 10 other names before that one will be conveniently forgotten. People don't turn to psychics when life is going great. The main emotional triggers are the loss of a loved one, a painful breakup, fear of the future, and a sense of uncertainty when facing a big decision. In moments like those, a person is at their most vulnerable. Their critical thinking is blunted by grief or anxiety, and they're looking for any kind of anchor. That vulnerability is ruthlessly exploited. The promise of contacting a departed loved one or receiving an accurate prediction about the future in such a moment is an incredibly powerful lure that temporarily numbs the pain. The psychic here is not a genuine bearer of supernatural abilities, but a kind of charlatan therapist selling the illusion of comfort and control. And yet, despite the regular scandals and exposés, the industry isn't just surviving, it's thriving. The reason for this paradox lies deep in the human psyche. People need control. It's unbearable for us to accept that the future is unpredictable, that random chance can destroy our plans at any moment, that the suffering of our loved ones is meaningless from the universe's point of view. The psychic industry offers a simple, understandable answer to these existential challenges. It explains that death is not the end, that misfortunes are karma or a curse, and that there are people who can see the future, meaning you can prepare for it. The psychological comfort that this illusion provides turns out to be more important to many people than the objective truth. It's important to understand that an interest in psychics is not a harmless hobby. It can have serious negative consequences. Financial loss is the most obvious. People hand over their last savings for sessions to remove a curse or cast a love spell. But there are even grimmer outcomes. When a person with a serious illness refuses medical treatment in favor of being treated by a psychic. These kinds of cases periodically make the news and sometimes end in tragedy. Moreover, a dependency on constant consultations and predictions can paralyze a person's will, robbing them of the ability to make their own decisions and take responsibility for them. Here's a simple example. A married couple has some conflicts, the kind that happen to almost everyone and could, over time, smooth themselves out. But the wife decides to seek help from an astrologer who gives her a disheartening verdict. Your husband is completely wrong for you. Your zodiac signs cannot live happily together, so you should get a divorce. A trusting woman will carry that thought around in her head, and at some point she may actually file for divorce, believing the astrologer's prediction. That's how a belief in complete nonsense can destroy an entire family. So what can be done to counter this? The main weapon is critical thinking. Its foundations are laid in education, and it's something worth developing in yourself, consciously. It's the skill of asking questions. How do I know this? What's the source of this information? Is this claim testable? Who benefits from me believing it? It's the habit of looking at promises of miracles with a healthy dose of skepticism, demanding evidence, and comparing the claims against the known laws of nature. An alternative to belief in mysticism can be mindfulness, an honest acceptance of reality as it is, with all its uncertainty. Yes, the future is unknown, and we can't predict it exactly. But we can learn to cope with that anxiety in healthy ways, through planning, through psychological work on ourselves, through building strong social connections. We can accept that loss is an inevitable part of life, and instead of trying to communicate with the departed through dubious intermediaries, we can channel our energy into valuing the living and keeping the memory of those who've passed alive in a meaningful way. It's harder than paying for a session and getting the illusion of relief, but it's honest. And right now, I've got some good news for you. That's one less illusion in your life. That's all from me. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.